Thank you, Deb. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Northbrae's Zoom service on this glorious Easter morning. We're so happy that you are here with us today. Welcome to April, welcome to spring, and welcome to celebrating together. Before we begin, there are announcements, and John Oldham, our council president, has a very important message for us. John?
Oh, good morning, everybody. This is your minister update, and this is a good one. The Minister Search Committee has recommended a new minister for Northbrae. She has enthusiastically agreed to be our minister, and we are now negotiating with her. So today I want to introduce her to you, the congregation, and tell you a few things about her. So here's some of the basics. Her name is Reverend Christy Ramage. She has been the pastor at the First Congregational Church in Antioch since 2004. She lives in Port Costa near Crockett, which is within commuter distance. She has a BA degree in religious studies from UC Santa Barbara, a master's degree from Indiana University, and a master's of divinity from Yale. 2 weeks ago, we had Christy preach a short service just for the search committee in our chapel. She is an exceptional preacher with very well-crafted sermons interspersed with stories and an interfaith perspective. She is strong and experienced in both pastoral care and community outreach. Her answers to our theological questionnaire were amazing, and we are going to make them available for any of you to read. After the service in the chapel, the committee had a potluck dinner in the parlor with Christy just to get to know her better. We all had a great time. She is an engaging conversationalist and also a good listener, outgoing, gracious, intelligent, deep, and with a great laugh. I think maybe the best description I heard was simply that she is a lovely person. The search committee highly recommends her. As I said, we are now in the negotiation phase, so she is not yet officially our new minister. The next step is to have a special council meeting to vote on her. This time we are having the new minister sign a contract with a vote by the council rather than having a covenant with a vote by the congregation. We recognize a covenant is very important, a sacred contract between the minister and the congregation. This really should be a decision by the whole congregation, not just the council. But for a number of reasons, many of them having to do with the pandemic, the council decided to have a contract instead. Also, Christy needs 90 days from the time she signs the contract to wind up her time at her current church, meaning 3 more months of guest ministers and congregation-led services. So we decided to put off the official covenant as done according to our bylaws. And instead we'll plan to do this at the next annual meeting in February. Hopefully we will all have returned to normal by then, and we will all know Christy much better. In the next week or so, the council will meet to vote. At that time, the search committee will update the council on everything we know about Christy, all of our impressions. Council meetings are open and all members of the congregation are welcome to join us. We want this to be as much as possible a decision by the congregation in addition to the council. We plan to send out a written summary of Christy's background via constant contact early next week. In the meantime, we invite all of you in the congregation to contact one of us on the search committee to give you our personal update. The committee members are Diane McNenny, Ruth Brayton, Carol Kuhn, Suzanne Baptiste, Diana Bessemer, Jay Miyazaki, and me. Please give us a call or email us with any questions or comments you might have. This is Easter, and what a great and appropriate day to announce our new minister and mark a new beginning for Northbrae. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And more exciting news, next Saturday, our intern, preacher, and technical wizard, Allie, will be ordained as an interfaith minister. Allie is our preacher today. A wonderful ceremony will be streamed next Saturday, April 10th at 1 p.m. A link to this service will be sent out this week on Constant Contact. We encourage all to attend via Cheese YouTube site. Carol Ann Fusco will be the preacher next week. She will be assisted by Suzanne Baptiste. Northbrae YouTube channel now has a link in the bulletin. You can find it at the bottom of your bulletin. You can watch previous services and tell all your friends. Please subscribe, as that helps us get found by others. Thank you to the social media committee. Movie night is April 21st. Please watch the 1947 classic Gentleman's Agreement on your own and join us for a discussion of the film about anti-Semitism and discrimination. The Zoom link is on our website. Feel free to invite your friends. As this is the first Sunday in the month, I will lead a communion service after this service. Don't forget to stay. And now we welcome Ron Nunn to read the sacred reading. Ron.
Good morning, Northbrae, and good morning, Northbrae friends. A big welcome on this Easter time. The sacred reading this morning is taken from a poem, The Phoenix, by Shirley Maya Tan. On days when we feel like scorched earth, like corroded rust or trampled dirt, all we have to do is turn our faces toward the gentle breeze and be sprinkled into the four directions, be swept away by the wind's tender breath. We are made holy through this burning, like a phoenix rising from the ashes to become more powerful than it ever thought possible. The scorching does not destroy us. Rather, it burns through the chaff until our greatness is revealed, and what's of real value remains. This is our defining hour, the moment we are made whole by what was made through the burning. So let us be marked, not by sorrow or pain, not for false humility, or for thinking we are less than we are. Let us claim our brilliance within the debris. Let us dance on the ashes of our previous lesser selves, and let the stars be engraved into our bones, and our divine fearless nebula return home. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and from the rust our masterpiece shall rise. Amen.
That was Mariel on the flute, and we thank Mariel. Now please join in singing "O Day of Light and Gladness" found in your bulletin.
tides of life are flowing, fresh, manifold, and free. In valley and on uplands, by forest pathways dim, all nature lifts in chorus the resurrection hymn. O dawn of life eternal, to thee our hearts upraise the Easter song of gladness, the Passover of praise. Thine are the many mansions, the dead die not to thee, who fillest from thy fullness time and eternity.
Please join me in prayer. Lord, we are happy today to join together in the celebration of Easter. Our worlds hold many problems as we struggle with the pandemic, vaccination, threats to our government, and threats on our streets. Let us put these worries in perspectives and look at the greater picture of the earth as we celebrate renewal and resurrection as it is springtime and the daffodil heads bob in the breeze and the trees and the bushes are riots of color. Please join me in saying the prayer that is recorded in Matthew 6. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And do not bring us to trial, to this time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Our sacred story today is entitled On Hesitation. It is written by Shirley Strashinsky. On Hesitation. On March 17th at 9 a.m., my neighbor, George Yamashita, appeared at my door with a thermos of coffee and a box of donuts, one with green sprinkles as a nod to St. Patrick's Day. I was wearing a green vest to honor my Irish father, but George had come to celebrate our having reached the third week after our second shots of COVID vaccine. A milestone, a signal we hope of the beginning of the end to a pandemic, which is waging war on our planet. After a year's worth of waving at each other over the back fence and regular phone calls from George at Trader Joe's asking if I needed anything, we could finally sit down at my kitchen table. Always first on our agenda is his son Andy and my grandson Evan, childhood pals at the school up the street, both now seniors in college. George is expansive, quietly jubilant. Andy is in journalism, on his way to a career in sports writing, already having managed 2 internships. The only solemn note in our celebration was when George brought up the increase in violence against Americans with Asian backgrounds. I remembered the day almost 20 years ago when I interviewed George and his wife, Julie, for an article I was writing about the World War II internment of Japanese Americans in camps throughout the West. Julie was born after the war, and she told me she didn't learn of her parents' incarceration until she was a teenager when her sister learned about it in school. It has taken 47 years for the US government to admit that shame was theirs and apologize. I met Lori McCain more than a decade ago in an exercise class at the Albany Y. Her name sounds Irish. In fact, she is Lorraine Wu McLean, Chinese American. She grew up in San Francisco's Chinatown, studied law at Berkeley and Columbia, and has been practicing for some 30 years. At Columbia, she met Charles McCain, also a lawyer, who would go on to teach at UC Berkeley. Chuck is also in our exercise class. He is Caucasian. They have a son and grandchildren. Lori's father's memorial service was held at Northbrae. He was, she said, an extrovert who loved people. I remember the chapel was filled that day with both Caucasians and Asians. She told me, I don't think my dad was, I think of my dad as a very effective bridge between the Chinese community and other races and ethnic groups in San Francisco. He was head of his family association, the Eng family, cousins of the Wongs, and on the board of many organizations. He also talked to groups like the Italian American Club, the Conference of Christians and Jews, and various African American organizations. Lori and Chuck are a remarkable couple, easy to be with, much admired, which is why I was surprised by a letter Lori emailed to a small group of us disclosing that even though her family has been in this country for 4 generations, she often feels as if she's treated like a foreigner, never to be seen as belonging. At the beginning of the pandemic, she told us about getting precautionary email warnings from her Asian friends as attacks against Asians increase. Friends sent her tips on how to handle the danger just in case. She should carry an alarm on her keychain. She should keep her cell phone on video mode, all of it just in case. I was surprised too by some of our responses. Several began with, I felt hesitant to ask, then went on to list their own family ties to Asians. One son has a Korean wife and 2 granddaughters. I could add a Chinese American daughter-in-law and grandson. Another friend has a Chinese daughter-in-law and another grandson. Northbrae members can offer many examples of this growing diversity and proverbial melting pot, but it doesn't silence the angry voices that echo over this country now, rising in a time of national emergency. So what will? Lori believes that education is an important part of the answer, that the considerable Chinese contribution to the building of the West needs to be reflected in our history books. Maybe more urgently, we need to stop being hesitant about asking how our Asian friends think and feel about living in America in this 3rd decade of the 21st century. Scapegoats once again. And maybe we should not assume our Asian friends know how much we treasure them if we hesitate to tell them. Now we welcome Jacqueline with our solo.
There's been a change in me, a kind of moving on. Though what I used to be, I still depend upon. For now I realize that good can come from bad, that may not make me wise, but oh, it makes me glad, and I change in me.
Ron Nunn will now give us the, read the scriptures. Ron.
Wow. And the scriptures today are taken from Sirach, Corinthians, and the book of Luke. Firstly, from Sirach. It is the moon that marks the changing seasons, governing the times, their everlasting sign. From the moon comes a sign for festal days, a light that wanes when it completes its course. The new moon, as its name suggests, renews itself. How marvelous it is in this change, a beacon to the hosts on high, shining in the vaults of the heavens. And from Corinthians. And so we do not lose heart. Even though our outer nature is wasting away, our inner nature is being renewed day by day. For this slight momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all measure, because we look not at what can be seen, but what cannot be seen. For what can be seen is temporary, but what cannot be seen is eternal. And from the book of Luke. On the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly two men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners, be crucified, and on the third day rise again." Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Amen.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you all. So let me begin by addressing the juxtaposition between our readings and the video you just watched. In the last few years, I've established a tradition for myself I look forward to every Easter. I could care less about candy and eggs, but what really gets me hopping? NBC's rerun of its Emmy-winning live version of Jesus Christ Superstar. Does that make me a nerd? Probably. The irony behind the now yearly broadcast of the critically acclaimed musical Jesus Christ Superstar lies in its plot, which directly questions the gospel's teaching of Jesus's life and death. We watch and listen through some very catchy musical numbers to a very human depiction of Jesus. Not only does Jesus question and doubt God himself, but we empathize with the swirling emotions of overwhelm as the crowds flock to him for healing and leadership, very often blowing the reality a bit out of proportion. Earlier lyrics from the musical point to the sense of hysteria around Jesus and who he really is, as told by the infamous Judas Iscariot. All the good you've done will soon get swept away. You've begun to matter more than the things you say. Add these feelings to the political unrest running rampant under Roman authority, and you have a recipe for some chaos reminiscent of our ongoing political and social divisions. Was the musical's lyricist Tim Rice far off in saying, "It happens that we don't see Christ as God, but simply the right man at the right time in the right place"? Perhaps. But what may prove even more powerful than a bodily resurrection is the resilience of our spirit, that which we all possess. If Jesus is as human as we are, then we too are capable of immense wisdom and compassion. We too can know and experience resurrection. Now, where does all of this history and musical theater fit into our own lives? Humanity differentiates itself from other living species in one key way: storytelling. This is our universal language, our way of communicating and better understanding the world and one another. And there are themes and motives we naturally fall back to, a rhythm as natural as a heartbeat. Regardless of how distant and different we seem from other cultures, past and present, we all return to that same uniting thread of story that resonates in our souls. We tell the stories of religious figures like Jesus, Muhammad, and the Buddha, describing them in hyperbolic qualities that have continued to cling to our hearts for generations. The mythology around resurrection is one of many thematic examples we naturally gravitate to, and for good reason. Just as the sun rises and sets, the ocean tides ebb and flow, so too does our collective spirit and hope. And the mere thought of escaping the inescapable grip of mortality, now that sounds miraculous. But ultimately, each of our great religious figures were as human as you and me. That's not just the core message in Jesus Christ Superstar, but it's also key in fully embracing this Easter Sunday. God set us upon the earth mere images of the divine, and we chose to exercise autonomy in discerning light from dark, acceptance from bigotry, hate from love. As time and stories tell, this discernment is no easy task and can often feel like we're treading through the dark, reaching in hopes of finding a light switch. Through people like Jesus, Muhammad, and the Buddha, we're reminded of how God moves through the world and can manifest in the flesh. Considering Jesus's example, we recognize a man who lived and worked among people of every background and social standing. He loved children. He was a healer and a philosopher. He sought justice that gave back the dignity of every single human being. Such a life sounds angelic, maybe even unattainable. And yet, Jesus lived a human life, and he died a human death. The Gospels tell us some varying accounts of the details surrounding Jesus' death and resurrection. But today we turn to the book of Luke. In our Christian society, the details of the Easter story likely sound familiar, but one quote, one question stands out above the rest in that passage. Why do you look for the living among the dead? This particular question comes not from the disciples, but from two men in dazzling clothes. Now, you can interpret such a descriptor as you will, but I see God's wisdom personified. If Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, and the other women are just focused in that moment on burying Jesus's body, then do they not realize what Jesus had already planted and brought to life far beyond the human flesh. And even though the setting of Israel in 4 BC had no mass communication, we're still asking questions about Jesus's resurrection and the implications that story has. Whether or not you believe in salvation from sin, undoubtedly, we gain deep insight from this Christian example of rising, falling, and renewing. The spirit that Jesus embodied has played a vital role in our progress in humanity. In seasons where our morality may lay dormant, there always comes a restored equilibrium. We turn back to the divine, and we use the mustard seeds that our great spiritual teachers planted to guide our footsteps. Today, we celebrate resurrection, something so beautiful and so tragic, a true balance of darkness and light. To fully embrace what is eternal, we must first acknowledge death in all its forms. We cannot resurrect without succumbing to struggle and turmoil. The ashes from the wildfire are what nourish the soil for growing new, abundant life. And perhaps the ashes even grow feathers on the wings of a phoenix ready to soar. And as our congregation receives COVID vaccinations and our public spaces start reopening, what better time to discuss resurrection than right now? Surely and steadily, we are moving forward together toward a collective resurrection of some semblance of a normal life. We are not just rising again, however. Our dormant roots firmly planted in the soil that we've tended over these many months are growing stronger than before, and hopefully more empathetic and compassionate too. Our resurrection doesn't have an end date, a magical aha moment where we'll see a complete renewal.